Welcome to part 2 of our video series on how to build communities of learning in the classroom. In this part, we'll discuss some specific practices and tips of how you can create communities of learning in your class. Let's take a look at some strategies, some tactics we might think about employing in order to do so. And there's no one way of doing this. There's a lot of different opportunities based on the class you're teaching, your own particular personality, your way of approaching the class, technology available, the student composition. Any good community organizer is going to work with what they have, using some core principles at the same time being flexible enough to respond to whatever unique environment that he, she, they are operating in. So let's take a look at some of these things. Going back to Peter Block, we have this quote: "Community offers the promise of belonging and calls for us to acknowledge our interdependence. To belong is to act as an investor, owner, and creator of this place." So this becomes a foundational piece in creating learning communities or communities of learning. To acknowledge our interdependence. The professor, the student, the technology, the staff supporting the technology, the academic staff, the parents, whomever is involved, all play a role in this and all should be acknowledged and called out as stakeholders in this process. Students are investors. Faculty are investors. Staff are investors. And we're also all owners. And we're also all creators. Being a co-creator, we have a shared sense of responsibility over that kind of ownership. And it's really crucial that we emphasize that with students, that they're not just passively receiving information, they're actively creating information. More on that in a second. So what's this mean for faculty and student partnerships? What is it based on? Well, here are some key points. First, there's this idea of trust and respect. Mutual trust, shared respect. Making sure that we demonstrate trust to students, but we also entrust them. They have a responsibility. There's a shared sense of power. I often talk to my students about it being a benevolent dictatorship. This idea of, I am more knowledgeable on these topics. It doesn't mean I own all knowledge. I just know have more knowledge. I can give up a sense of power and give them an opportunity to know things too. Even if I might know something, I might not know, for the opportunity to allow them to know more than me, to share power in what we design, to share power in what we know, to be powerless so that the students that sometimes have more power, to demonstrate shared risk. I'm taking risks in the classroom sometimes in terms of what the assignments I give, the technology I use, the things I try, which may or may not work. And it's important to acknowledge that I am taking on risk, and in terms of being risky, I'm also showing vulnerability. If it goes wrong, I can be to blame. I'm vulnerable. But in being vulnerable, I'm also sharing a sense of vulnerability with the students. So not playing it safe, taking some risks, and encouraging them to take risks as well, and not penalizing them when they do, and it might not work out as well as we had hoped. All creating a shared learning, right? That we are co-constructing not only content, we're co-constructing knowledge. We are learning from each other, identifying times when I've learned something from them I didn't know before. Or in the class, calling out, I don't know this answer, can someone look it up? Or can someone be responsible for going out and bringing it back to class next time? Not just my job to give information, it's their job as well. One of the things I've referenced a few times is this idea of course co-design. And let's dive into it a little bit more because it's a really, I think, beneficial strategy to building community in the classroom. So let's look at this one paper, real quick quote from this one paper that I have that I really think is valuable. So the quote is, "These student-faculty partnerships to redesign undergraduate courses challenge students' customary and often comfortable passive role in the classroom, as well as a common academic staff assumption that their disciplinary expertise gives them complete authority over the learning process. This collaborative approach prompts both students and academic staff to confront fundamental questions about the nature of teaching and learning." So this idea of moving beyond students' passive role and comfortable role in the class. You're probably going to find that not everybody wants to be an active participant or in the creation of a class. You're going to find people who are just want to be there, to attend lectures, take tests, check the box, and move on. And that's okay, right? That's okay. Because rather than trying to move using a business term, the detractor, right? Rather than trying to move the detractor, businesses can often be better off trying to move the passives to be a promoter, or take the promoters and really get them excited about being, super promoters. And in doing so, you can create that buzz in the community, in the classroom, to pull along the detractors. And then, the detractors, neutrals and promoters are this idea of net promoter score. Really doesn't matter what that means, but the takeaway is we can often get stuck trying to reach the people who are not engaged, rather than really trying to engage those who are on the fence and super engage those who are really, in the moment. It doesn't mean we ignore those detractors, but it means that we try to pull them along through creating this larger group excitement. Try by creating that community. And it's an important thing to think about in terms of how you allocate your time, because time is finite. But you can pull them in, right? You can give them, if everyone, group norms will tell us that if everyone is, singing along, they're going to join in the tune. And by doing so, you can actually get them engaged. And when they become engaged, reward them for their engagement. Another key piece is what I would call purpose-based learning. Why are we here? What's the purpose of this class? Now, again, their immediate purpose might be to check a box, get 3 credits, fulfill an elective, get a 5th class, whatever it might be. Can we elevate that purpose through connecting the course to things that matter to them, whatever those things mean? You won't know what matters to them until you ask. And so another important part of this is asking what matters to them. How this will help them in ways that not just we think are important as faculty, but they think are important as students. So finding out what their purpose is. One thing we know from business and we know from organizations is that when there's a higher purpose to achieve, people respond and connect much more than if it's just system life or obligatory or something that's devoid of purpose and it's more transactional. So moving from the transactional to the purpose is a really key part in this strategy. Another key part in this strategy is this idea of constructing caring. So what does this mean? Let's take a look. Constructing caring. How do we show students that we care and encourage them to care for us and each other? One thing we got to do is keep it flexible. Be flexible in terms of how the syllabus proceeds over the course of a semester, how content is being understood, how we're evaluating assignments. And I know that can be a challenge, especially if there's a multi-section class where we're kind of limited in our degrees of freedom, and that's all true. But even there, you can find degrees of flexibility. And I've been telling the students, we can't change everything. We're kind of, bound by larger forces. However, let's look at what we can change, what we can be flexible on, and work within those parameters. And that can be important. Show your vulnerability is another important one we talked about. Showing you're vulnerable will help them feel safer in being vulnerable. Use checkpoints to evaluate where students are and how things are progressing, as well as what needs to be changed. Not just at the end of the semester when it might be too late, but through the semester, and that just might be asking a question. How is it going? Where are we at? Making a quick anonymous survey. Having key informants. That's a trick you use in ethnography where we might have a few people who we know we can rely on to give us a sense of what's going on from the inside. Practice empathy and encourage feedback related to checkpoints. Empathy would mean understanding where they're coming from, what their world is like, especially online. But even in the classroom, we have no idea what's going on in our students' lives, and they often have no idea what's going on in our lives. And in some ways, we want to maintain that sense of separation. In other ways, we want to open up a little bit, create opportunities for empathy, to understand their world, to relate to where they're at. And even if we can't relate to where they're at because we've never been there, show that we are concerned or attentive to where they are. Give students a say and allow them to make decisions to shape the class. We talked about that in terms of course co-creation. Explain etiquette, especially online, but even in class. What's the etiquette for engagement? How are we expecting one another to act and behave? What's the protocol that we can rely on? Go back to the idea of community. There's practices, right? What are the practices that we want to create with each other? Not just a professor on the syllabus first day saying this is what we expect. Give them a chance to identify what we expect. What would they like to see? Allow them to own this piece of it. And then open up spaces to speak, change, and experience. Speak their minds, to change who they are, to change their minds along the way, and you change your mind. Let them convince you of things. And then have a shared experience. A nice term that's been out there, if you look at the literature on pedagogy, is this idea of humanizing teaching. This even relates to, in the design world, of like human-centered design, bringing humans back in, kind of, so to speak. So what does this mean? Humanizing is a pedagogical strategy that seeks to improve equity gaps by acknowledging the fact that learning environments are not neutral. Rather, they often operate to reinforce a worldview that minoritizes some students. This is especially true online, and this piece is taken from a paper, Humanizing Online Teaching to Equitize Higher Education. All of our worlds are not equal. They're not equal materially. They're not equal in terms of our demographic experiences with the identities we carry with us. They're not equal by any other number of factors that render our experiences unique and in many ways unequal. We can't change all that, but we can recognize it. And we can recognize how students might be experiencing the material differently based on their different experiences, and also how physical environments, technological environments can make it more challenging. So really trying to seek to understand that and how the material can interplay and intersect with those lived experiences, and using those as opportunities carefully, right? Not calling people out necessarily to make them feel uncomfortable, but recognizing in how we talk about these things so that they know we are aware of their different struggles. And if they are comfortable in doing so, if they choose to do so, providing the opportunity for them to express and connect from their first person experiences. If they're not comfortable to do so, that's fine too, because we can be the voice of that experience in recognizing it, providing other material on it, and exploring it in relation to the topics that we're covering. So here are some steps that we can use to humanize the content. Technological check-ins. What are the technological capabilities of your online students? It's a good idea to ask, to find out, to do bandwidth testing, to check in on, who else is using Wi-Fi in the space at the same time. Preferred pronouns. Ask what pronouns students would like to go by and explain why such questions are important. A real easy way to do it is by encouraging them to put their pronouns in the Zoom box, where they're rename themselves with their pronouns, so that we are aware when we're referring to each other what pronouns to use, or just out of a habit using extended pronouns, she, he, they, or other identifiers we might want to use and think about. Or if possible, try not to use pronouns, right? Might be opportunities not to use pronouns, but that might also not create an environment that's welcoming if it feels forced. So probably a good idea to identify what pronouns people would like to use. Social distractions. Inquire as to what distractions might be present that make classwork challenging. Share your own personal distractions and struggles. Phones going off, dogs barking, kids wandering in, delivery people coming down the driveway, whatever, right? People online are going to be dealing with a lot of stuff, a lot of distractions. I get distracted all the time. I acknowledge that with my students, that, it can be really, really difficult, and not always having to feel like we're patrolling their behavior, but reminding them to work at curbing their behavior, to try to limit the distractions. And when they feel distracted, if the class is feeling distracted, do we need to take a time out to refocus? Is there an opportunity to do that? And if there is, how might they recommend we refocus when people are feeling distracted? Assess LMS experiences. So learning management systems, Blackboard, Canvas, there's others, can be notoriously frustrating, especially Blackboard, as we know. That's a great opportunity to create a point of connection with the students, a shared set of experiences. So you might ask, what have your experiences been with the LMS and other classes? Discussion boards, Turnitin assignments, grading, accessing materials and resources, getting into syllabi. Are there ways of avoiding that? If we want our students to have access to our syllabi, do they have to go through dual factor authorization or dual authorization to get there? Can we put a syllabus on some other site? Can we put it, in a Slack channel? Can we put it in a team site? Can we put it just at a website that we have for the class where they can just go there and get some documents to use? And what ideas might they have to make their lives easier? And this is another opportunity to engage them. And also, again, express vulnerability. In the uncharted waters of online education, show your vulnerability and uncertainty. We're all trying to figure this out. It's a moving target. Technology improves, it changes. There's a lot out there. Don't have all the answers. It's okay not to have all the answers. Let them know that and encourage them to help you find the answers. Another important element is providing clarity. Communicate clearly and effectively. What is it that you want? Explain the why in terms of the materials being read, the assignments being passed out, and the videos being posted. Here's why I want you to watch this. Here's why I want you to read this. Here's why we're doing this assignment. And it might be at multiple levels, right? Your online group assignment might be to better understand the course material, but it's also teaching them to work effectively in teams in distributed environments, which is going to be a really essential skill in their professional lives. So we can operate the why of an assignment at very different levels as it pertains to the course and as it pertains to larger skills that they might need. When experimenting with approaches, technology, or assignments, let the students know why the approach is being used and invite them to help design it. So if we're experimenting, have them design the experiment. Here's what we'd like to accomplish. Here's what me as a professor, what I'd like to see come out of it. What way do they think would be best to help me evaluate their learning of this material, to help me evaluate their competency around using some concepts, things like that. And that does get into this idea of facilitation as instruction. Often as an instructor, we like to think of ourselves as the knowledge expert, that we have to tell things. Looking at this idea of the hero's journey, it might help us recalibrate or reconceptualize our role. The hero's journey is, if you watch Star Wars, you're familiar with it, right? Obi-Wan Kenobi is not the hero. The hero is Luke Skywalker. The job of Obi-Wan Kenobi is to guide the hero through the journey to reach kind of like this redemption or higher status. As a professor, are we positioning ourselves as the heroes of this journey? Or are we positioning the students as the heroes and we are the guides? How can we facilitate their journey through the class to maybe in an abyss, right? Midterms, struggling, and then into a rebirth, that through this process, through these trials and tribulations, they will come out on this other side transformed at a higher level, at this, more of a mythical figure, if you will, using the kind of like narrative elements of the hero's journey. So position yourself as a facilitator and not just as an instructor. And through facilitation, you might find that instruction actually works better. Elevating identities, right? How do we identify not just as students in the institution, but as people in this community? A shared identity is one of the key elements of community belonging. What identity is being achieved as a result of learning the material? What kind of status are they gaining or becoming? How can you use the power of identity to create connection with the students and the material? It doesn't really matter the class. even if they're taking my sociology class for an elective, do I reinforce you're becoming sociologist? You're one step further in being a sociologist. You're achieving the status of a sociologist. If they're taking a marketing class or an accounting class or a finance class or whatever, to what extent are they becoming a thing? We might make fun of badging in a lot of ways. That badging seems kind of trite and kind of artificial, especially when you see it on LinkedIn. But we can gamify this in some ways of signifying levels. You're through 2 weeks, you're at this level. You're through 4 weeks, you're at this level. We are now, this level of competency. We want to get to that level of identity because once we're there, we're able to do certain things. It affords us certain status in the eyes of one another. Another technique you might use is if you have teams, have the teams give themselves a name, a mascot. There's actually been research that shows that when teams create mascots, New England Patriots, why do we need a mascot for New England Patriots? There's only one football team in New England. Because having a mascot, having a flag, having an emblem, having a symbol really creates connection and a shared sense of belonging. These totems are fundamental. So have the teams create totems. What would be their symbol? What would be their sign? Maybe in the class, we create a shared symbol for what the class represents. Something you can have fun with and play with throughout the course of the semester. Finally, esprit de corps, this idea of team spirit. People rowing the boat in the same direction. Do we achieve mutual understanding? Have we achieved trust? Do we have some kind of dedication because we're solving a problem that has purpose, that's greater than just the grade in the class? Are people cooperating towards achieving that purpose, to fulfilling that goal? We're walking down the path through that vision, towards that vision. This idea of the sum greater than the parts, right? This element of e pluribus unum, out of many, one, right? We're coming together to form this whole that individually we couldn't achieve on our own. And even online, we might feel disconnected because we're not in the same room. That can be a really powerful element to draw people in. And finally, leveraging diversity. Now, diversity is a big topic. It's a big concept. But when we have this esprit de corps, when we're all rowing in the right direction, in the same direction, when we have a shared sense of purpose, a shared identity, shared goals, shared vision, mutual obligations, recognizable practices, we can then leverage the uniqueness that we each bring towards those things. Just because we have a lot of shared doesn't mean we're the same, but it does mean we feel connected. And through feeling connected, those elements of diversity are enhancing our collective movement towards this goal rather than serving as signs of separation. So having that esprit de corps, whether in the classroom, whether in the workplace, or wherever in the community, can be a huge fundamental element to achieve these communities of learning. So here are some ideas, right? Play with them. There'll be opportunity for sharing other ideas you have. There's a lot of material out there. We don't have enough time to go through all of it. But hopefully, by talking about some of it and talking about it in both a theoretical way and a practical way, we can stimulate each other in terms of what we can do to create these communities of learning across classes, across topics, across modalities, across technologies, and really have fun trying to explore being both instructor, facilitator, and community organizer. Thanks.